one of the things that was really exciting to me going back is Justin and Lance came to me and they said, we've got this great company, we'd love you to be an investor. And I said, I love nut butter, right? And my wife is all about those squeeze packs, and it's changed our lives in the peanut butter world. And like a family with 2 kids, I have an 11-year-old and a 14-year-old. There's a lot of peanut butter consumed, and knowing that it was local and the passion around it and the quality of it, it was just, I couldn't ask for anything more. Except I said, but I can't invest because those squeeze packs, they're just nasty. Like, we use them and we throw them away, but I can't really invest in this idea that more stuff is winding up in the oceans, that more plastics is winding up in the oceans, because it seems like it's got to go to zero as quickly as possible. And they didn't get mad, they didn't get upset, they were just like, okay, that's interesting. A few months later, they're back, and Justin says, I've been working on this problem, and it's been bugging me too. I really want to figure out a solution for it. I've got this film. I don't know if he had a whole roll yet, but he had a little bit. He had these samples, and he said, I don't know if it's going to work. We got to test it. It's too expensive. All the issues that we're going to grapple with as a group. But the fact that he had already begun that process, that for me mattered, and I thought I definitely will invest in this company, because this company is trying to move the industry forward, and that was powerful for me. So thank you for doing that. And somewhere along the way, the idea of like getting everybody involved with that got put out there. And as I sat listening to everyone introduce themselves, I was in the same boat. Like, yeah, I think 5 or 6 people show up. People that probably aren't the right people. But as I listen to the group that's here, it's the right people. Like, this is the people that you would need to actually achieve this goal, which is a big goal. So thanks for being here, first of all, and thanks for Boulder Digital Works for letting us throw this thing here. You're going to be excited to see some of the other stuff they're doing too later on. This is I have a presentation, and it's not about squeeze packs, because I don't know anything about squeeze packs. I come out of the world of marketing, and this is me on the cover of Fast Company like 2 years ago, and it was nice to be on the cover, but you could see from the photo I'm not really happy, right? And I wasn't sure why I was unhappy. But it had something to do with the fact that my values were going one way and my day-to-day job was going another. I had been so passionate about my job forever, and over the last year, I just didn't jump out of bed the same way. And for me, the realization came when I was speaking to another group, and they got to the Q&A. The Q&A is always the most interesting part. And they got to the Q&A, and someone asked me about aspartame and diet sodas, right? And one of our clients was Coke Zero. And the reality was we don't let it in the house, right? And so that wasn't something that you could say as the chairman of this large company. And that those golden handcuffs and that maze that I was navigating as my career went on, it got harder and harder to navigate until I just was in that situation and I just had to flat not tell the truth. And that was actually a good moment for me, because I realized that can't be the place where I am. And my values are not the same as everybody's within a 1,000+ organization, right? Not even close. So the idea that I could fire that piece of business or move away from that piece of business and then 200 people lose their jobs, not realistic. So I didn't want to do that, yet I did want to find the ability to say what I actually thought again, right? So that's why I'm unhappy here. Why I'm happy here, and I can't think, I'm sick, I don't feel too good, but there's no place I'd rather be, honestly. Like, I'm really glad to be here talking to you guys. And I want to talk about a few things. One is this notion of the key to survival. And I've been in the business of helping companies survive and bringing companies back from bankruptcy and doing all sorts of stuff like that. And I've also just been a student of it. And I've got some thoughts on that. Number two, the problems with voting with votes, what's really occurring, and why our political system's sort of collapsing. Not going to get, this isn't going to take 2 hours. And the untapped potential for consumers to vote with their dollars. So this is an interesting statistic. Lost in the wild, what group is most likely statistically to survive? Someone might know this, because this is Boulder and everyone's into survival in the wild. Do you know? No? It's children, and it's young children. It's like 5 to 9-year-old kids statistically survive more than adults. And the reason why is because children go into the situation and don't have any expertise, right? All they know is, I'm in the wild, I'm lost, what am I going to need? I'm going to need shelter, number one. They just intuitively know that, and maybe some water. And so they just try to find these things. And when rescue workers are looking for children, they tell them, you got to look really hard if there's kids. If it's adults, they'll be like laying down under a tree, If it's a kid, they're up in a log, and not just a little bit, like they're way up. Like, get down and look. Now, as an adult, if I was in the wild with my kids, I'd be like, all right, kids, I'm going to get you out of this, right? And what I should be doing is like, what do you think we should do? Because we're really screwed. And so I think in business, we all develop these expertise, right? And we all strive to, I guess, develop expertise. Expertise only works if the future is going to be like the past. And there are a ton of reasons right now that we all know that it's very unlikely that the future is going to be anything like the past. So our expertise becomes a liability. And I've got some more slides to say the same thing. So something about the future, though. If any of you have read any Ray Kurzweil, he's a futurist, and some heads are nodding. Yes, I don't understand most of it, but I did understand this concept, and it's about the accelerating rate of change. And what's happening is our change is based on sort of like Moore's law. There is about every 10 years there's a doubling of the amount of knowledge on Earth, right? And because of that, you have this geometric pattern of technological advancement, right? Right now, we just got to the part where it sort of goes vertical. So when we think about the next 20 years, we tend to look back at the last 20 years. When we think about the next 100, we tend to look back at the last 100. What Ray says is mathematically, the next 100 years will be like the last 20,000 years, right? Which basically is all human technological development will reoccur over the next 100 years. So it's radical. The next 20 years will be like the last 100. The next 5 will be like the next 20. And so on. This, in a way, is one of the only things that makes me optimistic, right? And it makes me optimistic because, to date, our ability to screw up things has outpaced our ability to fix things, because our technology is just not there, right? But what this says is our technology is going to advance to the point where we will be able to catch up, and we will be able to fix things. And I think that that's what this group is about. It's about because one of the other things Ray says, it's not just the linear piece of it, it's the collision of all that knowledge. And that collision in this group is what's going to potentially allow us to create these new technologies. So, seeing and reacting to a world like this isn't a luxury. I think that in business, I've worked with lots of clients that see sustainability as a luxury, that see doing the right thing as a luxury, and it's not really a luxury anymore. And we're seeing more and more businesses get whacked because they thought it was a luxury. Hummer thought it was a luxury, right? And it was not. It was a necessity. So there's a really interesting experiment that actually doesn't include any of you, I think, in a way. But I'll tell the story anyway. They conducted this experiment in 83. Some of you have probably seen it online. I don't have the video embedded. But what you do is there's two teams. They pass the basketball, and you're asked to count how many times the team with the white shirts passes the basketball. And you do, and you focus, and they pass it, and I think the number's like 27. And at the end, you're like, yes, I know I nailed this, right? And then the thing comes up and says 27. You're like, cool. And then another frame, they say, but did you see the gorilla walk through the room? And you're like, no way. And you rewind the same video, and sure enough, a gorilla like walks through the room, does a thing like this, like not even hiding it, and just keeps going, and you did not see it, right? And that's called inattentive blindness. I'm trying to forward here. And so we think that we will notice the things that matter, right? The gorilla walking through the room is something that we should notice. It would be so demonstrative that it can't be missed. But researchers and cognitive psychologists have proven you will not notice. It's impossible. And the reason why it's impossible is because you all have jobs, right? And your jobs don't include noticing. Your jobs are very specific. So without lifting your head up out of that job occasionally and taking the time to actually try to notice, you cannot notice. So what's amazing about this group, and what I applaud, is everybody here has done that, has decided, I'm going to lift my head up. That's what this whole day is about, I think. So thanks for doing that. Everywhere we look, it's easy to find examples where the status quo, that, reliance on experience and expertise is not proving very effective. And businesses aren't recognizing how radically the environment's changing. There's a bunch of megatrends that are changing the business environment. And again, it's not our job for most of us to recognize these megatrends and recognize them for what they are, because sometimes they seem like fads, and sometimes they may be, whims, and sometimes they may be the right thing to do, but they are something else. Keep going. So, real quick, I want to look at some of these areas of change. They're inescapable. We can't avoid them. I don't think that any of these are in fact fads. One that we talk a lot about is this notion of the super me, right? And every brand I was working with over the last few years was saying, people's love of our brand, I worked in a lot of automotive too, right? People just don't feel the same way about our stuff the way they used to. And their feeling was they had to build something different. Like, we just got to build a sexier car. There's something wrong with our cars. They're not sexy the way they used to be. Well, the reality is that my wife and many, many people have very nice cars. She gets in her car at the end of the day, and she drives as fast as she can, not noticing the burled walnut or any of the German accessories, and gets home and gets on Facebook as fast as possible. And begins to build a digital version of herself, a super digital version of herself, that way outstrips any other brand's ability through rubbing up against it to tell a story about her. And most of us are experiencing that. You don't see Facebook. You don't see people doing dishes on Facebook. Like, hey, doing dishes again. We all are doing dishes all the time. You see, the kids just got great grades at a great school. We just drank this bottle of wine. We were just on vacation in Hawaii. It's the brand that people are able to create for themselves is just very powerful, and they're not going to give up on it. Now, the good news is that, well, I think that's all good news. And you see, obviously, Facebook is a sensation, Twitter is a sensation. So things that empower this digital version of ourselves, and this is ego. So I'm not saying this is a great thing, right? Because this is like really a massive ego that folks are creating. And it's not only very much something that they can control, it's something that they can share, right, on a global level. And they can do it rapidly. Most companies are not realizing that this has occurred, and so they're still playing by the old rules of how do I get people to love me, you know? Well, the way you get people to love you is you get them to connect with you, and actually you get them to need to use you to build a bigger version of themselves. So Flip is one of my favorite examples where they were in the world of video cameras, and video camera development, innovation, was all about features. We got to add another feature. This one's got zoom. This one's got a higher level of higher fidelity. This has got I can put supers on it. All this stuff that engineers thought was cool. And what Flip realized is, no, there's this digital self that people want to get these assets onto. We're going to make a camera that does nothing, really, other than go on and off, and instantly loads it to multiple platforms. Instantly allows you to either share it or load it to Facebook or Twitter or whatever. And the year it was introduced as the fastest growing electronics product of the year, not coincidentally. Another one that very important is the energy economy. This is the one that whether we're at peak oil or not, we're close. Demand is going higher. This super dense energy source that we've relied on that's created our entire world, gotta love oil. If you don't think you love oil, then you're delusional, right? So you love oil, but they're not, well, some people say they're making more. I don't know. They're probably not making any more. The demand for it continues to rise. It's going to continue to rise globally. The cost of it's going to continue to rise. And so to be ignorant of this notion is to be Hummer. So you've got a brand, and I don't know the numbers, but it's in the billions of dollars that were invested into this Hummer brand. And for them to really be okay that they were a symbol of excess and not see that they needed to transition that into a symbol of the outdoors or a symbol of individuality or something else was because they had inattentive blindness. They did not pull their heads up to realize what was happening. And so that investment is completely lost. No one will even buy it. You can't give it to the Chinese. It's funny, except it's tragic. Well, wait, those are always the same. Yes. So Walmart is one of those companies that for years a lot of people in the world of sustainability, I think, sort of love to hate because they have such an enormous impact. But what we're all realizing is Walmart is doing more than most. And they're becoming kind of a champion of this. I think that what I like to take away from it is Walmart, for the last 30 years, has been pretty much better at business than anybody else on earth, right? And so with the best at business, should I be surprised when the best at business is the first to recognize the new business landscape, to recognize what really is happening, and what really will need to be done for them to be the best business for the next 30 years. I shouldn't really be surprised, and so I've stopped. I'm no longer surprised. And Walmart is gaining competitive advantage in all that they do in the world of sustainability and efficiency. The digital workforce is a fascinating thing. We're experiencing it here, actually, with live tweets going out, the stream. I actually stream my show on Justin, so I should correct that. Not Ustream. That's okay. But we love Justin TV, and Justin the Nut Butter. All things Justin are good for us. So this digital workforce allows for something that hasn't really been possible before, and that is every single person within your organization can take an idea, can take a video, can take a statement, can take a slide, can take a PowerPoint, and broadcast it to the entire world without asking, often without asking, and to all sorts of effects, wonderful effects and potentially disastrous effects. So when I was working at the agency, one of our clients was Domino's Pizza. And there was a guy in a restaurant, and he had one of these cameras, probably a phone video camera that allowed you to upload to YouTube. And he and his friend were bored, so they started taking a video of him making a sandwich, and then he was like, it'd probably be funny if I put the cheese in my nose before I put it on the sandwich, and, you know, did some other things to the sandwich, and posted it on YouTube. Instantly, 10% decrease in sales the next day, right? Domino's does everything they can to get the video down. They use social media and the CEO to control the damage, and they're much heralded for the work that they did and the way they did that, and it was well handled. But as we were working on it and experiencing it, the thing that we kept coming back to is, wouldn't it have been better if there was some way where the employees themselves would have been able to, you know, say en masse, that's not us, that's not how we act. And this wasn't a bad person. This was a person who was bored. And because they were bored, they got fired and they went to jail. Because you can't tamper with food. So, but many of us are bored. And many of us, through that boredom, will put things out into the world. So what if we, rather than saying, don't stick the cheese in your nose before you put it on the sandwich, because everyone knows that, what if we created ways for this digitized workforce to be good for consumers and be good for themselves and be good for the company? And one of the things that came out, well, there's the Domino's example. But one of the things that came out of that was with Best Buy, another client, we created a thing called 12 Force. And what 12 Force allowed a board employee or blue shirt to do is he could look at his phone, or she could look at her phone, and all the tweets from all consumers would be consolidated through one app, and they could scan and see what customers were asking to Twitter, and then they could personally answer those things. So the company got smarter. The individual had something to do. They had something to do that actually made them feel good and intelligent about about the job that they did. So it was a wonderful example of, don't tell me how to act, provide better ways for me to act in this new digital world. Feeding us, you guys are way more familiar. I shouldn't even talk about this because I don't know anything about this, but I do know that Marks and Spencer made a pledge for no GMO in the UK, and instantly went on the list of favorite brands. They went from kind of nowhere to top 3 consumer brand in the UK. Chipotle does a really neat thing with Providence, a really good job at explaining to people where the food is coming from. Used to be McDonald's, part of the McDonald's family. I think that McDonald's made a mistake in unloading this property, because there was so much that they could have been learning from what Chipotle's doing that they could have brought into their organization. Sort of a shame, but I applaud Chipotle for what they're doing. Sustainable systems, something that we're talking about here. Coke actually did the first, what we're talking about a lot, which is life cycle assessment, right? The first one ever done was in the, 60s or so. You guys know all this stuff. Coke was one of the first ones where they did the LCA around bottles, glass versus plastic. Coke and Procter & Gamble. And what they decided is, hey, you know this closed loop system of bottles and deposits? Let's dump that and go to plastic. Yeah, so anyway, different goals at the time, though. You know, maybe someday they do another one and they go back to that, what I thought was a beautiful system. Coke's not getting dinged for this, but they have a potential liability right now, and many of us in this room do, which is 93 million logoed pieces, right, of trash. So not only is it trash, not only is it not good for the environment, you wrote your name on it before it went in there, right? So, at least we should be developing a package where the name comes off. That biodegrades. And it's like, I don't know whose stuff this is. So maybe that's the first incremental step. And I want to say, I think all incremental steps are good. It's part of the advancement of technology. The idea of a silver bullet here may not be achievable, but I know that something's achievable. And those incremental steps that this group is going to take, they're important and they're valuable. And don't feel bad about those because they're going to be more and more rapid, and they build on each other, obviously. One of my favorite examples of an actual closed system, of a real cradle-to-cradle. There's not many cradle-to-cradle products out there, but Shaw Carpet figured out how to do glues that could also be recycled, and a carpet that could be turned into food for the new carpet because of that. And my favorite part is you don't have to remember where you got your carpet. When you pull it up, the phone number of who to call to pick up your carpet's on the bottom of the carpet. So it really will work. The nowness. This is something we're also experiencing with the streaming web. The web, when it first began, was very much a historical document. It was all about it was a library of things. Google searched like a librarian. But what's happening now, and there's a company in town actually that does work on it called One Riot, and One Riot's developed this idea of search. But if you search a topic, it doesn't tell you. If you search Justin Nut Butter on One Riot, you would find out about this summit happening right now, versus the website and pictures of Justin on his bike, which are great. Not knocking that. And so this sort of transformational, this idea that the web is becoming a real-time live document. Justin TV, which we're streaming on, I've got a slide, forget about it. Moving people is also something that I've worked in automotive a ton. And again, the automotive companies are struggling. GM is the most famous, but then you've got Toyota that's down over 30%. This is the darling of industry, the people that could not do any wrong. And somehow they've been blindsided by things to the tune of a 30% decrease. They did not plan that. They didn't expect it. And their recalls were handled poorly because they didn't understand the world that they were doing the recall in, right? They did their recall in the world that existed 5 years ago. And in that world, you could decide, hey, I'm going to release this information in about a week, right? I'll release it. I've been working with the feds, and we've agreed. It's like, no, it's now. The minute you know about it is the minute we need to know about it, right? That is our new expectation, and it's a radically different expectation. The other thing the car companies are convinced that they make are cars, right? And I think it's funny that Ford said, if I would have asked consumers, I would have made a faster horse. He didn't think he was in the car company business. He didn't think he was in the horse business. He knew he was in the personal transportation business. And there's so much that car companies can do to move themselves back into the personal transportation business, and they need to do it now, because although the car was very good at moving us around, a car that gets 200 miles a gallon that's stuck in traffic for 45 minutes is still a miserable experience. And so I think they're beginning to look at it. I mean, the first time, years ago when I started harping on this, they weren't at all. And they weren't imagining how, why not when you sell a Ford, right, that key fob can do all sorts of stuff. For the amount of money that they spend in one weekend of putting Howie Long on TV, Howie Long's not Ford, though. What is he? Chevy? So for a weekend of Howie Long, they could put bike sharing into like 5 U.S. cities. Literally. That's not even a made-up number. They could, and then they could say, hey, congratulations, you've got a Chevy. Your key also unlocks bikes when you're in town in these 5 cities. And by the way, the same key, if you want to get a subscription from us, the same key fob, you can also wave it at the bus and get on the bus and the train and have all your transportation you can put with Chevy, right? We'll be our system. We'll be your system. But so far they don't see this. Other people are seeing it. Zipcar is seeing it. So, what's happening is, and for me, this was one of the other reasons why I wanted to leave a giant agency. Even though I made it giant, I was employee 16, and then we grew to over 1,000 people. The most interesting stuff is happening on the fringes, I think. And it's the stuff that seems little, but it has an enormous impact, and it forces the larger organizations to change. Zipcar is obviously on fire with their notion of personal transportation, which is very different. I love bike sharing because I was involved with creation of B-Cycle. We partnered at the agency with Trek and Humana to create that. I think there's a lot of potential for that. So transparency is what I think we're dealing with a little bit here, and it probably is a big part of the reason why change is going to be forced on everybody, right? The expectation for the recall was about the understanding of transparency now, of the Toyota recall. I don't think that it's okay for you to have information, Mr. Corporation, BP, and for us not to have it at the same time. That's not the way we're going to play the game anymore. And consumers are pretty adamant about that. There's not a lot of wiggle room there. And I think that the choice in transparency is super simple, and we're finding this true, right? You either make yourself transparent, and it's great, people love you for it. You take your worst problem, and you say, this is our worst problem. We make these things that go into the trash, and we hate it. Can you help us fix that? You can do that, or you can wait for someone else to make you transparent. And I think the first example of the digital world making a company transparent was probably Nike. That for me, around some of the labor issues that they had, and what was interesting is they had a 69% drop in profits the moment that happened, and the thing that's really troubling, if you work on the brand side, is you can't wash that off the brand. I mean, it's been over 10 years, and it's hard to get off. It's there. So, in contrast, I think I've got, Patagonia and the Footprint Chronicles. They take what they're not very proud of, and they say, here's our carbon impact across a wide range of products. Why don't you check it out? If you know where we can get a button closer to where we're getting this button right now so we don't have to fly it halfway across the world, which we're doing, we would love to know about it. And you go to that site and you're like, this is worse than I thought, actually, right? But they're the ones telling me about it, and they're the ones trying to solve it, and they're the ones that are inviting me to be part of that. That's really powerful. And so I want to buy their stuff because of that transparency. Now, this idea of the least you can do is, and this is not my job to introduce this, but there's this website that the kids at Boulder Digital Works, young men and women, I shouldn't call them kids, at Boulder Digital Works created. And what it is a sort of open source platform for Footprint Chronicles, so that different companies can come in and say, I want to champion what's a really big problem for me. And the first company doing that is Justin, saying, I'm staying up at night and I'm not able to sleep because we've got these squeeze packs. Here's the issue. Here's the ways to solve it. We want you to help us spread the word, come up with ideas. And so the squeeze pack issue for leastyoucando.org is the first of hopefully many issues and many champions that will come along from different industries. So the problem with voting with votes, I was going to talk about this a little bit. Most people's mom or dad took them through this idea that, the kings were the most powerful force on earth, and then the church was the most powerful force on earth, and then government was the most powerful force on earth. And now, son, if you look, the largest buildings, which are the indication of the power, are corporate buildings. So corporations are the most powerful force on earth. I kind of got that, but in a way I didn't get it. And I still thought, maybe because it was in transition, I still thought government was sort of the most powerful force on earth. And it probably, in some ways, was until we had a lot of global corporations. And once corporations become global, they're working across multiple governments, and they're able to play governments across each other. The other thing that happens in each of these transitions is the former great power goes to work for the new great power. So the kings went to work for the church, then the church went to work for the state, then the states have gone to work for corporations. And so the main job of the government is to provide a really wonderful platform for its set of corporations to compete against other corporations. So just a couple facts about that. Of the top 100 economies on Earth, how many are nations? It's fun to do the Q&A part. Right? Any guesses? It's actually not that bad. It's 49 are nations, but less than half of the largest economy. You had it? Yeah. AT&T contributed $2.8 million to the Republicans and $2.6 million to the Democrats and spent another $32 million on lobbying to both. So it's not like one side is about one thing and one side's about another. They're both paid, right? And there is vigorous involvement from the government or from corporations in our system of government, right? And when you have a system, involvement changes things. And the involvement of consumers has gone down while the involvement of corporations has gone up. We all know how health care reform wasn't really health care reform. It was health insurance reform. Since the 40s, the corporate share of taxes fell from 33% to 15%. So you know, our tax base isn't what it was. We all worry about not having the ability to fund schools and parks and all the things that we need as a society. Well, and we hate paying taxes, but corporations hate paying taxes more, and they're able to avoid it better because of their vigorous involvement and their lobbyists. I don't have a lobbyist. I don't know who. Some here may have a lobbyist. When I moved my company to Boulder, I actually got some tax incentives in the end, not from Boulder, but from Colorado, and I met with Hickenlooper with a bunch of other business people, and the idea was to make sure that he was business friendly, which he is, and he's a wonderful guy, and I will vote for him. But the idea was we went around the table, and each head of a company explained sort of what they'd like to see, and most of it was, we need to make this place a great place for companies. And really the de facto idea was lower taxes, right? Colorado should have the lowest taxes of any, state in the union. Oh. They got around to me, and I said, I moved here because there's amazing quality of life. The schools were good. I came from Florida where the schools were terrible. The schools were good. There's parks. This year, they're actually cutting teacher jobs, right? Like a huge amount of teachers are going to lose their jobs. The schools are going to be shittier. And that's not why I'm here. I'm here for the place. So you gave me an incentive to move here. I wish you wouldn't have, right? And as an individual, you didn't give me anything. There was no like, Alex, awesome to have you in the neighborhood. Here's a tax break for you personally. There was none of that. But the company got a tax break. So I think more people need to examine the fact that the notion that you just cut taxes and that creates more industry and that creates more jobs and that this trickle down idea. I think the trickle was the word you got to focus on. It's a trickle and it's really tiny. So corporations need to support some a larger or more a fairer level of the tax burden. This is our old idea of voting, and we are so emotionally attached to this concept because we grew up with it and it worked, right? And the idea was I get a vote and I get to look around and find the person who is most like me, and I give them that vote, and then they will take my hopes and dreams to to Washington or to local government. And local government works much better than national government. But they'll take that and they will do my bidding, right? Well, it's just not happening. So like as a country, we're swinging one way, then the other way, and everything seems to be the same no matter what way we swing. And we can't understand it because we're so nostalgic about this idea. Well, this little vote that I gave somebody, right, goes up against $3.5 billion in lobbying, right? And so for every winning vote, for a winning candidate, there's $40 in lobbying that was spent versus me with my vote concept, right? It's logically, that's not going to work. Thank you for that vote, but someone's in my office daily with real people really talking to me. And that's what I mean by vigorous involvement from corporations within government, right? Now, this is only lobbying, so this doesn't include contributions. And the limits to contributions, as you all know, are gone now. So the concept of our vote going up against this is how a political cartoonist illustrated. And I think that that's pretty accurate. So economic fundamentalists, which I think fundamentalism is dangerous in anything, whether it's religion or economics, and a fundamentalist will say a fair and equal market will solve any problems. This could be true. We have no idea because we don't have fair markets, and so what we need to do is we need to potentially hope for another counterbalance that allows us as consumers and individuals to balance what is corporate power. Now, all of us here work in corporations. Well, probably almost all of us, and we all, and it's like a dual life, right? Where you make decisions, and you make decisions in this corporation, and then you walk out into this world, and you kind of know that if it was just you and it was just your decision, you would have tried to do it differently. But you've got this quarterly profit that you're trying to hit, and there's enormous demands from stockholders that you do that. And so I acknowledge that dual life. And I think that the issue is not that needs to go away. It's just that there needs to be vigorous involvement throughout. So some companies are taking this idea of transparency into their organization where individuals can say what they think within a company, right? And that's extremely powerful, and not the corporate way. The corporate way is carry the party line. You know, on your way in the morning, glance up at what you're allowed to say and what you're allowed to be about, and then when you're publicly speaking, you say that. It's a problem, because although corporations have all the rights of an individual in our society, they have no soul. And so, although they are filled with souls, we've sort of agreed as souls inside this corporation to mute our true feelings while we're in there. And there's brave companies that are beginning to change that, and I think it's really important. There's other factors that are changing it too, and this is the untapped potential for consumers to vote with their dollars, and it's transparency. Transparency has enormous power to change things. Daniel Goleman, who wrote Emotional Intelligence, which many of you may have read, he also wrote a book called Ecological Intelligence. Brilliant guy, said, as control of data shifts from sellers to buyers, companies would do well to prepare for this informational sea change. The business rule of thumb, cheaper is better, is being supplemented by a new mantra for success, sustainable is better. We all know that is a sliding scale, right? But we also know that this notion of transparency is just being born, and the tools are just coming online, and the information is just becoming available to people. And it's not going the other direction. It's going to continue, and it's going to get more and more robust. I go back one. The potential power is that you vote with every dollar you spend, right? And we have heard this idea, and it's not really been very easy, right? We buy something, and we set it on the table, and there's a lot of, I always think about the water canisters, and there's a bunch around the table, which is awesome. But many of us have had the experience where you put your water canister on the table, and then someone across from you says, "You know why that's not good?" Right? Because life cycle assessment is complicated, right? You do it to me all the time, right? You know why that's not good? You're like, God, no, I don't, because I'm not an industrial scientist, and very few of us are industrial scientists. But the data of industrial science is out there, and the tools are coming online. And by tools, I mean apps and phone apps and websites that allow consumers to make decisions like an industrial scientist would make a decision. So coupled with transparency, this notion of voting with your dollars becomes really powerful. A few things. I put Least You Can Do on here, which launched day before yesterday at Potential Power. Carrot Mob, I don't know if you've seen Carrot Mob. That's a good one to go to. Brand Karma is sort of interesting what they're doing. Source Map is purely carbon, and it's a wiki for, it's an open source wiki where people post the carbon impact from any product, and it's becoming a library of everybody's stuff out there. And my favorite, which is goodguide.com. And hopefully many of you know about goodguide.com. If you don't, that would be the one that I would check out, and I'll talk about it. Well, I already talked about that. So if you use the goodguide.com app, it is really powerful. So I was on the phone with Dara O'Rourke, who is the inventor of Good Guide. He's also the industrial scientist who was working for Nike and saying to Nike, "You got problems at these factories," you know, and they would say, "No, I just called the manager. It's fine." And then he would be back out in the field and be like, "Well, yeah, you got problems. I mean, we got to talk about it." No, it's all good. And he went on and on like that. And he actually took that information and he made them transparent. And since then, he has launched this product Good Guide. He's also an industrial scientist from, where? MIT? MIT, I think. Professor at MIT. And the way it works is, with this app, you can point it at any product, and it will give you a score, right, for a total rating, a health rating, an environmental rating, and a society rating. And what's really fun is you can go into the website and you can change your personal filters. So if you don't want high fructose corn sweetener, if you don't want squeeze pack films, if you can change these things. And what happens is pretty radical, because he took me through it the first time I was talking to him. I asked him to scan a product. He scanned it and he said, "Oh wait, sorry, I got to change." And I said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, you know, there's a ingredient in there, there's a food coloring, and so it won't show up for me. I get alternatives." And I said, "That's really interesting." So you basically have, through changing your filters, certain things are becoming invisible to you. And wouldn't companies like to know when that happens? So what they're gathering there is real-time shopping information and real-time preferences and behavior, and they can monetize that, I hope, to companies who want to know. 20% of the people who are shopping for peanut butter don't even see your product because it's in plastic, or 20% of the people don't see your product because you're using this food coloring. I don't think it takes a lot of that to create change. So you know, not only the transparency of them able to provide this instantaneous life cycle analysis, but to then give you the power to customize it and then have that data go to companies is really powerful. Now, right now, it's really in its infancy. I love Good Guide. I think that they're further along than anybody else. But they could screw up, right? They could wind up, you know, taking money from certain corporations and not monetizing their service in the right way and compromise their standards and say, well, maybe it's okay if, you know, consumers don't need to worry themselves about that, right? And if they do, although I support them now and I'm on their advisory board, I would, and I've told them and I publicly said this, which I guess I'm doing again, that I would take my any help that I can provide, I would take it and I'd put it someplace else, because it's too important that somebody gets this right. And where it will go in the future is when I just walk by a product that really matches my filters, really matches my desires, really provides a platform for me to vote with my dollars, my phone's going to buzz. And I'll say, whoa, 100, what was that? I'm going to buy that thing. And so it's very exciting and very powerful. It's a bit of a win-win, I think. And my hope is that this empowered consumer, with all of these votes, right, along with government, creates a new balance to corporate pressure or in corporate power, and it looks something like this. And this is way, way out there. But when I look at the story of humanity, and I think that, you know, the kings who had the power, the church had the power, the state had the power, and then corporations had the power, I don't think that that's where that story ends. All through that story, humanity itself has been, you know, getting more and more of the power through these changes. And I believe that the most powerful force on earth should be humanity itself. There's the largest buildings, the most celebrated areas should be our acknowledgement of us all together in the commons that we share. That's where I think that's where this Sustainability Summit is a step in that direction. One other thing that's happened that makes this seem possible is the media, mass media, from the time of probably before the church, but certainly, you know, if you visit the Duomo and you see the mass media of the day selling Christianity with amazing amounts of technology, you know, basically their version of a 3D movie, right? I mean, you see Jesus and there's literally gilded rays coming out of his head, and you know, what did that feel like to the 15th century person? Like, oh my God, dude, I just saw like Jesus and the stuff is like, it's so real. And so so this mass media of that day, and then the mass media that followed, that was controlled by the state or sponsored by the state, and the mass media that we enjoy generally now, which is sponsored by corporations, has been replaced today by, for the first time, social mass media, right? And there is no sponsor of it. So this year, 40% of all the media we consumed as Americans was peer-to-peer, with no sponsor, no interruption, no agenda other than our own shared agenda as humanity. It seems astounding that's happened, and I am sure within the next couple of years it'll be more than half. So most of the media that we're going to consume very soon will be us talking to ourselves about the things that are important to ourselves. That's going to create a lot of change. It gives me a lot of hope. So thanks for taking the time and listening.
So I'd like to open up
probably went long.
a quick Q&A if you have a few extra
Oh, yeah, sorry.
stand wherever you like. And I'd like to start it off. I think voting with your dollars is really powerful, and I think that consumers ultimately will drive, you know, corporations and companies to do hopefully the right thing. And I thought it was really fascinating that just yesterday, consumers voted with their dollars. Frito-Lay's Sunchip brand was losing 11% of the market share, and they pulled their compostable PLA structured film, and they're now, you know, reevaluating that decision. What does that say? Like, what are consumers trying to say? And do you think that, you know, we're taking a step backwards? And is this summit, are consumers really going to care about what we're doing here today?
I think what it says is that it can't be worse, right? And I think that any new idea has got to be as good as the old idea, right? And I don't think that there's a lot of room for compromise. Now there's probably a decibel level that, I mean, we all probably I bought the pack. I don't even like Sun Chips. I got the pack just because I wanted to hear it. And I also think, you know, as a marketer, I was disappointed that they didn't spend any time saying, hey, you know that sound? That's you doing the right thing, right? like, why not tell people what that sound is and have fun with that sound? Because it really was kind of fun. Now, in their space, there is a lot of sneaking, of snacking. So, you know, that could have been where it really became a problem. It's like, I can't get my hand in there silently enough so the whole house knows that I'm eating chips, and I don't want anyone to know, right? Or in the office, right? It's like trying to get your hand in there, and the person on the other other side of the cubicle, like, what is going on? But you know, I think that whatever solutions that are achieved, they've got to be very comparable to what existed before, and so that's the lesson there. I think the other lesson, though, is tell people not just about, you know, tell people why it's fun, that it's different, right, and what the difference means. Don't just let that. Don't try to ignore that. I would have made, honestly, when I heard the bag, I thought I would have made the whole campaign about the sound of the bag before they launched. I wouldn't have done any of the stuff they did with just the fact that watching it degrade.
I think one of the challenges to that is, I wholeheartedly agree with you that maybe it's a decimal too much. If you make it sound exact, we'll just stay on the bag. If you make it sound exact, consumers won't know that it's different.
True, yeah. That's the other thing. It's like maybe it should be quieter, right? I mean, it should be stretchier and quieter. It should have a difference, yeah. And so that's why I thought it was a lost opportunity, though, because it did have a difference, but no one really had fun with that and celebrated that.
So you made it noisy on purpose?
No, we did not make it noisy on purpose.
So you mentioned the Nike drop in profits with the labor issue that was exposed. Recently, we saw the issue with both HP and Apple manufacturing in China with the suicide rates. There wasn't a decrease in the profits for either of those companies when that was exposed. And I'm wondering if that is because it was multiple companies using the same manufacturing, and so the exposure was diluted, or if the Nike situation was just so focused on Nike. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I hadn't thought about it, but you're right. Those were sort of dramatically different. I think it may be just our feeling about children versus our feeling about, you know, workers in a factory and what our expectations are for that. And then suicide not being the same as like losing their fingers in machinery, right? It just maybe feels a little bit of a step away, and so harder for people to make that linkage. But I hadn't thought about it.
Any other questions? Alex, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks.